You're listening to Beyond the Sermon, the podcast of First Methodist Church in Collingswood, New Jersey. On our podcast, the goal is not just to share our sermons, but to go beyond the sermon and talk about what we're learning and what God is doing in us and in our community. This fall, we're living in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and learning how to live from our model, Jesus. This conversation was inspired by our series, The Gospels. You can find more information about our church at fumccollingswood.org. Thanks for joining us for this conversation.
I think yesterday I called you our fearless leader, and you do fear the Lord, so I apologize.
I do fear the Lord. That is true.
And are there any new fears since your knee surgery?
No, I'm doing okay. I think I overdid it a little bit on Saturday, going to one of the boys' football games. I think initially I underestimated the difference between arthroscopic surgery and open incision surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And
which one did you get, and why did you overestimate?
Well, so my shoulder was arthroscopic. Like, they just put in the little probes and cameras and did all the things through like 3 little holes in my shoulder. On my knee, there's like a 3-inch incision where they had to like get in there and cut the tendon open and do all kinds of stuff like that. And yeah, that hurts more, the incision itself. So yeah, I think that's where my underestimation came. But doing good, on less drugs than I was yesterday. And each day I wake up and it feels a little better than it did the day before. Still made communion bread for Sunday.
It was really good. And Dick did an incredible job.
Yeah.
And it was like, do we have a new official communion pastor? I was so glad that he was able to do that, and then was great with doing the benediction. I was like, oh, I can just receive communion and be done.
There you go.
Shake hands, kiss babies.
Better than kissing hands and shaking babies.
Depends on the day. Depends on the babies.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. Not super young. We're not talking like the bad for their health.
Shaken baby syndrome.
Yeah. Not that kind. But I will say, I preach. You're supposed to be asking me questions, Scott.
Yeah, that's true. So, go into your sermon from Sunday, in which you portrayed Jesus a la Rocky. Every man in Philly.
A good chunk of South Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah. But kind of like the everyman, the common man.
Yes, for sure.
And tried to help us see it from a modern lens. But what was kind of your inspiration for that? We read stories from Scripture all the time.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time, pastors try to get people to put themselves into that situation, right? And so they like try to explain what it would have been like and all those kind of things. But what led you to kind of reverse it and bring the story to us? Yeah,
so I've been prefacing with people and also having people pray for me, because this sermon was very unique to me in preparation and also in tools at my disposal in the pulpit. I'll say it that way. I had that out there, people praying. Afterwards, even one of our youth was like, what was different? And so for me, it was subtle, but it's almost exactly kind of what you touched on. I'm good at storytelling, naturally, not from the pulpit, I would say. And from the pulpit, I don't think I have a single time shared a fictional story, because I feel like I'm not good at constructing them. And also, if I do it too much, I feel like the attention and focus becomes on that story and not it doesn't enhance the scripture we're looking at. It turns us away from the scripture we're looking at. And so for this one, I was doing Lectio Divina from one of my books for school. So we have
give me a 30-second
in one
definition
of my classes.
of
That's a great
Lectio
question. I was
Divina.
going to ask you because from what I understand, Lectio Divina is very similar to our prayer session format, in which you are like, and it's been a practical way of engaging scripture that's been taught for over 1,000 years. I'm going to nerd out for a second because I'm in school. So when they like started making like colleges and schools and people were learning theology originally was the practice of like being a Christian. It wasn't necessarily all the theoretical beliefs of God, but like this is how you learn to walk with God. And Lectio Divina was one of those things in which they continue to teach even hundreds of years after its origin. So it's kind of like silencing yourself before God, praying before you get into the scripture, reading the scripture, and then, at least in the way this book formats it, it gives a little more context to it. It then asks you to like imagine yourself in the story if it's that kind of scripture. And then it also gives you some poignant questions to reflect on as you're reflecting on the scripture. And then praying for, Lord, how does this change me and my walk and how I follow you? And that's kind of the way the book's formatted. And so I've really, really enjoyed the book. I've already given it to a youth, and there's a young adult that's interested in it because sometimes just having that, this is what you do now, this is the next step, that like helps provoke instead of feeling like you're going blind into a part of scripture.
Yeah, and kind of a more simpler version of Lectio Divina, which just means version. That's what it means. It's not like some fancy name. It's just what they called it in Latin when they developed it. Yeah.
It's a dead language and we're still using it. It's pretty fancy.
Yeah. But reading the scripture, reading through a passage of scripture, generally out loud, even if you're alone, because there's a process that happens when we see the word and speak the word and hear the word that opens us up to what God is saying. And you just come to asking, God, what do you want to say? Are there things you want to highlight? And then you might do that a couple times. And then, if you're doing something guided, there might be questions for reflection. Yeah. Or if you're just kind of doing it on your own, you might just kind of see what God is leading you to, where he's highlighting things, what he is speaking to you out of those things. If you wanted to try it and you've never tried it, there's an app you can download called Lectio 365. It comes from the 24/7 prayer movement. And then they do 3 times a day. They've got a Lectio on there that you can kind of work your way through.
Which does not mean that if you download the app, you have to commit to 3 times a day.
No. You could just try it once and then delete the app if you wanted to. But it's worth trying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going through that section of scripture, and it said to like imagine yourself in it, or like imagine it happening. And kind of this whole picture started coming together, which I shared on Sunday. And then as I'm like rounding out the picture in my head and trying to explain it, I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I feel like this is God providing something for Sunday, but I'm not seeing what the ultimate points are to get from the story and how this helps us get there. So praying, rereading, all that kind of stuff, and kind of landing at these 3 parts of hoping, going, and praying. And I pretty much and I felt like I was so prepared and extremely underprepared simultaneously. Like I had almost the whole thing by like Wednesday, and then I was like, I don't know, it's just this weird balance of, okay, I have the points, I know this is going to get us there, and the past year, maybe a little plus, I've been doing like primarily manuscript-ish notes, or at least I do a manuscript and then strip it down. But every time I do a manuscript for my sermon, I feel like I'm hitting certain beats and it restricts my freedom of speech and connecting to the people that are listening, and that it becomes, the more I rehearse it over and over and over and over again, the more, that's how I end up at my like monotone-ish somber thing on Sunday mornings. It kind of loses the passion and intensity that I start out with, or that God gives me for certain parts or topics or themes. And it's like, okay, I just need to make sure that I get that information out there, this really important information out there. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to like hyper fixate on certain phrases or sentences. Like, I know the story, I know the image, I know the pieces. So then I had a much more bare-boned notes. On the pulpit, I had maybe like 2.5 pages instead of 8. And then even as we got like to Saturday, and I was like, okay, let me just make sure, look over. That's when he provided the Romans 15:13 and the story of Peter being prayed for. I was like, yeah, it's easy to say like hope and pray. I don't know, it just seems like, yeah, we know we're supposed to do that. And it's like, okay, but it's really important that we do that. And we need to see like scripturally that like this is what we need, like what we're called to, and but also that we're not alone in maybe our disappointment or disbelief in what God can do, since we've been kind of rehearsed into this, convince someone to go to church, and if they keep going, eventually they will believe. I feel like that can be the evangelism of a lot of churches. And that's why I was like, okay, how do I tell them, like, yes, we still do that, but that isn't the only or end goal of evangelism. Or it's like, okay, attending a Sunday morning is the only way to hear the gospel, versus like go and tell them the gospel.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hot take. The goal of evangelism is not to get people to come to church.
Agreed. But I didn't know how to say that.
Yeah.
In a church service.
Yeah,
without getting into all the complexities.
Not, right? Yeah. It's not, because while we absolutely affirm, not just because it gives us homes and pays our bills, that it is important for people to come and be part of a worshiping community where they are built up in the faith.
Yeah.
But the goal of evangelism isn't to get people to come to church. It's to get people to know Jesus. So that they can be changed and transformed by his grace, which in part comes to us through the church.
Yeah.
But the goal isn't to get good churchgoers.
And I think people who may even desire that think that the church is the best way for them to receive that.
Yeah.
And then the fruit of that would be they stop doing whatever bad thing that the person trying to tell them about God perceives, and then they attend church regularly. If we succeed at no longer, I don't know, keying people's cars, and then we start attending 2 or 3 times a month, then like we've succeeded in a changed life.
Yeah.
And it's not this church perspective. This isn't just 2025 perspective. I think it grew and grew in the expectations of the American church decades and decades ago. And so a lot of us have grown up with that just being the norm. And not seeing that in Scripture should make us question if the norm is right. Yeah. As I study the Reformation, and they started questioning all the norms, and it's I thought Reformation was like one and done. I was thinking it was like Martin Luther, he did the paper,
right? 95 Theses.
Was like, yeah, this stuff is actually kind of messed up. And then a bunch of people split, and we're done. And then we had some big voices that helped shape that new split. But it was like 4 or 5 big reformations and changes of thought that happened.
Right, so you had like the Lutheran Reformation that took place in Germany and all that. But then you also had the
Zwingli
in Switzerland, and then John Calvin and his group, and then you had the Anabaptists who kind of split off in what they call the Radical Reformation.
Yep.
But then even something that people aren't as familiar with is like there was also an English Reformation, right? That gave rise to the Anglican Church, and cynics will say, "Oh, it's just about Henry wanting to divorce his wife and not being able to." And I'm not saying that didn't play a role, but there were so many other undercurrents that were all flowing and coming together. And if you're ever interested, got a great book. Yeah, it's like a 800-page history of the English Reformation. It's called Heretics and Believers. I read that in my fun time reading last year.
You're sick. You're sick.
And so that idea of the Reformation and things changing, right? It's because over time, other things keep trying to get into what God has actually called us to be as the church, right? And so in a sense, the Reformation is the positive side of what's been called in recent years like deconstruction, right? There have been a lot of people talking about deconstruction. Unfortunately, it's led to a lot of people walking away from the church because they never get to the other side, right? There's a point where we need to kind of strip away some of those cultural and philosophical things that end up working their way into the church. But then where do we go, right? Where do we go with that? And where do you think we go with that?
Pressure.
Yeah,
the whole church.
No, but specifically in relation to this idea of how evangelism happens or how people come to know Jesus.
Well, I think that, like we talked about with the Reformation, is a big thing that changed in those times was higher literacy rate and the Bible being available in native languages. And so instead of just receiving the word from pulpit only, I think a great part about this series is encouraging people to be in the Word themselves and being in the Gospels themselves and reading it for themselves so that you have Scripture to contrast against what anyone says about it. So I would say that, for sure, step one. And I think as you read Scripture and it hopefully encourages you, I hope it encourages you. And is discouraging a thing? Discourage. Encourages and discourages you. Encourages you that all is possible with God and that He's able to do incredible things through anyone, no matter what we've done. Discourages all of your hopes you've put in the world that may not be satisfied as you follow Christ. Which is it's a tough balance and sometimes pill to swallow of this thing isn't going to be guaranteed in this lifetime, and yet God provides something so much greater. As we were studying in Sunday school with our kids, the prodigal son, and I love one of our students was like, I'm with the older brother. I think it's the older brother that stayed around. It was like, why can't I get a goat?
Yeah.
And if you quick refresh of the story, prodigal son takes inheritance, spoils it on
wild living, returns home, father happily receives him, throws a party. Older son stays back that whole time as a good son, and he's like, hey, he gets this big party, he was the bad kid, I've been around here the whole time, where's my party and I didn't even get a goat. He gets the fattened calf. And it's like, where's my goat? And it's like, okay, let's take this to where we are now in our situations. What's the thing of this world that you think God should give you for being a faithful Christian? Yeah.
And so one of the kids even mentioned like grieving a loved one recently. Like, Lord, I've been so good and faithful. I've prayed. Why couldn't I keep them around longer in this lifetime?
Yeah.
And we can do it with, why can't I have an easier financial situation?
Sure, or
why
this job that I wanted,
yeah,
or
this job that I want to get. Why can't you give me this raise or whatever it may be? And do you remember the Father's response?
All that I have is yours.
You've been with me this whole time, and everything that I have is yours, or all that I have, right? Depending on translation. All that I have is yours.
Because he meant that literally. Like,
yeah.
He gave the other son the inheritance. So by default, everything else belonged to this older son.
And at the same time that you've been here this whole time, that son has received work, housing, food,
sure.
this entire time. So it's all the blessings, and yet we look at the blessings of someone else. Or like, wait, but that one, that's the one I want. And so it's the acknowledging the blessings, and also all that God has and offers to us that we may not even desire or seek after.
Yeah.
But it's so much greater than anything we could imagine. So that balance of discouraging courage, and then as we transition that into how we view others, the hope we have for others, because it's so easy, just like in that story, to get distracted by the earthly temptations and things that we see and not focus on what God can do, what God can provide in a situation is insurmountable. It's insurmountable. And then as we go, it's looking for those opportunities, looking for the people that need it. I don't think you're going to be like, well, I can't really think of anyone that could use the gospel. Because if you're having that problem, either you've isolated yourself into a bubble and you aren't really being in the world, not a part of the world, or I think your heart might be really separated from the Lord's. And I don't think that anyone's going to find themselves that listens to this podcast in that situation. And so if we're in that latter half where we can think of those people, and you may even be questioning, like, how can I reach out to them? They're so hostile. They're so against Christianity. They're so all of these things. Pray, not just for them, but also asking God on how you can be Jesus in their life. And also, as we look at the examples of Jesus through this gospel series, what are ways in which I can love, in which I can demonstrate holy living and righteousness, in ways that I can be holy, that they see the difference in me from the world, and not for my glory, but to be able to point them to God and where it all is rooted from. So I think those are important aspects, in addition to the praying for them if they just say, I never want to hear or see you again, or they're just on social media and they block you, or whatever it might be. I don't know. But yeah, these are all really important things that, again, as I ended my sermon with, simple, not easy.
Yeah. Well, that's our conversation for today. But that doesn't mean the conversation is over. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these topics as well. To ask a question about anything we've discussed in this episode, or to join the conversation, you can head over to fumccollingswood.org/podcast. Thanks for being part of this conversation.